There's always more to the tennis season. Here comes the Asian Sway, where players hope to give that one last push to end their years with a bang. Welcome tennis fans to Tennis Traverse, Exploring the Game, the podcast that delves into the heart of the tennis world. I'm your host, Ivy Zhang, and in today's episode, I will be talking about the China Open. Before we begin, I do want to say that I feel like I've received so much support from all of you guys, and I'm really grateful of all the support I've received. And if you guys have any recommendations of any episode you guys are interested in particularly, it doesn't really have to be like tennis tournaments related. It can also be, for example, the episode I did on fashion, tennis skirts. It can just be anything really surrounding tennis. And if you guys are interested in that, please feel free to leave me a comment and I will be doing an episode on that. And now I want to talk about my story with the China Open. So the China Open was my favorite tennis tournament before experiencing the US Open. So when I was young, maybe around 4 and 5 years old, my mom will take me to China Open every year, and we lived like a hour drive from where China Open is played, and we would go not like every day every year, but like 1 or 2 times throughout the tournament to see players play. Like I've watched Rafael Nadal versus Novak Djokovic, and I've also watched Li Na play. And back then I really didn't have a strong interest in tennis. I wasn't a tennis player myself, but my mom really enjoyed watching tennis, so she would take me too. And from watching tennis, I really didn't develop an interest of playing it. I just thought that it was a really cool thing, but I actually started to develop interest in playing tennis after I went to a camp in Great Britain, but that's just a whole nother topic. But I just want to say that China Open is kind of what introduced me to the tennis tournaments, and I'm forever grateful. I really like China Open, just in general, how compared to the US Open, less people there are, and I feel like even though the US Open is already really casual, I feel like it's more casual in a way, and it's still a really important tournament for the players. So we'll start introducing China Open. So China Open is composed of both the women's side and the men's side, and for the women's side, it's a tournament of 1,000 points, which means that if you really think about it, China Open is considered one of the bigger events, and this means that it is the second most important tournament, the first being Grand Slam. So the maximum points you can earn is 1,000 points, excluding the Grand Slams, if that makes sense. And then on the men's side, it's still really important. It's worth 500 points, which is the third most sort of valuable points you can earn. So that's my introduction, and it normally takes place around end of September to the beginning of October. And so we'll now try to move on to this year's tournament and just some specific things I want to talk about. So I want to start by talking about the women's matches. So the first one is being Zhang Shuai beating Kessler and beating Emma Navarro after losing 24 straight matches. So in my previous episodes, I talked about how Zhang Shuai set a record of losing the most games in a row. She lost 24 matches in a row, which is straight up insane, because when you really look at her play, she really is playing well. She's not hitting the balls like poorly. She's hitting the balls inside the court, and sometimes it's really due to luck. And they were talking about how the China Open awarded her a wild card, which means that you get to skip qualifying. And for someone like her who's been losing matches for 24 matches straight, it's really hard now if she doesn't win to just continue getting wild cards, because the tournaments already gave her chances to prove herself. But I think she really used this opportunity to prove to herself that she is capable of winning matches, and she beat the American McCartney Kessler with a score of 7-5 in a tiebreak and 7-1 in a tiebreak. And then, surprising, I feel like really surprising to everyone else, she beat Emma Navarro with a score of 6-4 and 6-2. And Emma Navarro is coming into this tournament hot. She just went to the semifinals of the US Open, and this was really unexpected, I feel like. And she's also playing against Green Menin in the round of 32, which I think will be a relatively easy win for Zhang Shuai. So I'm really excited to see how she plays, and I guess that really just like plays into the narrative of how tennis can be so unpredictable. You can be losing 24 matches straight and just beating some of the best players out there. It's not really dependent on your ranking necessarily. It's more, in my opinion, dependent on how well you perform in that specific match. And if you just go out there and hit the ball, strike the ball so cleanly, like someone who's ranked like 500 have the capability of beating someone ranked in the top 10. So I think that's the beauty of tennis. And I also want to talk about Muchova's fire form even after the US Open. So she made a really deep run in the US Open, and after her wrist surgery, I didn't expect her to come back as fire as she was, but she made it to the the semifinals of the US Open, and she's also playing really well in China Open, which is something we don't really see from players. Because in my opinion, the US Open is such like an important Grand Slam. It's also the last Grand Slam of the year. A lot of players just devoted all of their energy to that, especially because it's also an Olympic year. So like players such as Iga Swiatek didn't play in China Open because they just need a break, to be completely honest. But I think she really designated her energy to just maintaining her top form, and I think Muchova is going to do really well this tournament. And so far, she's been beating everyone in straight sets. So she beat Anna Blinkova with a score of 6-1, 6-1 in first round. And then she beat the Chinese Yue Yuan with a score of 6-3, 6-1. And she's playing against Jacqueline Christian, which I think will still be an easy win for her. And I really do believe that she is capable of maybe even winning this title. So I'm really interested to see how she performs. There are also two matches I want to talk about that I think are worth watching, and I do have the highlights linked down below if you guys are interested in checking them out. So the first one being Yasmin Paolini versus Clara Tauson. In my opinion, I think Paolini kind of have the similar feel to Muchova, which is that both of these players has been playing incredibly well coming off of the US Open. And on a similar note, I feel like Paolini's just been hitting the ball super cleanly the entire year. Like, she's not making too many mistakes, and I think a lot of people would underestimate her even if she made it to the final of the French Open and the Wimbledon. But for her to again make a deep run in the US Open and to just make consecutive deep runs at a tournament like the China Open really proves that she is capable of making consecutive deep runs, and we shouldn't count her out no matter what. And I think I've learned my lesson from predicting the the US Open, because I really didn't expect her to go that far, but she really proved everyone wrong and she went really far in US Open. So she's probably one of the players you guys should look out for in terms of winning this title. The other match I want to talk about is between Naomi Osaka versus Yulia Putintseva. So this match, the reason I want to talk about it is because it's sort of like an important win for Naomi Osaka for two reasons. She's never got a back-to-back win since I believe April or June, And the other reason is she's never won a match where she lost the first set this year, and this is her first ever match to come back after losing the first set. So I think it's such an important win for Naomi, and really truly believe she has the capability of going really far in this tournament, just because players such as Iga Swiatek, which I think is really not a good matchup for Naomi, is not in this tournament. But players such as Sabalenka, who hits the ball really hard, Naomi might have a chance against, just because she is also a player who just uses her power to strike the ball. And I really like the variety of her game. She's adding more of approaching shots and just going to the net and finishing it off with a volley, which is not really what we see from her. And I think she normally likes to just stick around in the baseline and just hit winners. But I'm really interested to see what this change will bring her, because she obviously changed her coach, and so far I think it's been working well, but we really don't know, since she didn't really play against someone that's higher or matched her level. Her next match will be against Volinets, which will, I think, be an easy win for her, but I'm really interested to see what will happen later on. So yeah. And now I want to talk about some potential players that might be able to win China Open. And I sort of mentioned them briefly, but I kind of categorize them, and I will be summing them up. So the first category sort of are just top-seeded players, such as Aryna, Sabalenka, and Coco Gauff. So I think both of these players genuinely have a chance of winning. And they, however, both have just some chances of why they might not be the favorite. So Sabalenka, she's coming off from US Open win, and I think normally she recovers quickly from a Grand Slam, but she did make it to, she won US Open. So that's 7 matches already. And to win China Open, she also have to win 6 matches, considering she had a bye in the first round, but still she has to win a lot of matches, and I think that's just a really hard thing to do for a player like her. So I'm not doubting her, but I think that's one of the reasons why she might not necessarily be the favorite to win this tournament. The other player I want to talk about is Coco Gauff. So Coco Gauff, obviously being the top ranked players, I think is one of the favorites to win this Open. However, I think she's still, despite changing her coach, I think she has some part of her game she needs to work on, such as her serve. And I think when she plays against someone who necessarily will match her level, I think her level, then it's if she plays against someone who matches her level, it is then that we can tell if what her level exactly is, because right now she's just playing against players who are trying to match themselves up against Coco. But if she plays against Sabalenka, really, we'll know how well she performs. So I'm not sure how far she will go, but I think both of these players have potential to go really far. And now I want to talk about Zheng Qinwen. So I think Zheng Qinwen is actually the truly favorite to win this tournament, just because it's in China and she's just playing super well. She's hitting the ball super cleanly, and I get the pressure will be a determining factor, but I think she's just been playing really well. She beat Rakimova with a score of 6-1, 6-1 today, and she's playing against Nadia Podoroska, which will be an interesting match, but I think she'll have no problem getting through that match. And she really loves the Chinese crowd, and I think her energy really feeds into them. So it'll be really interesting to see what will happen, but I think she's one of the favorites to win this tournament. Okay, now I want to talk about some players that I kind of mentioned before, which is Paolini and Muchova. I think both of these players are in a group because they have a chance of winning these tournaments. I think if they are able to sort of stand their ground against players such as Sabalenka and Coco Gauff, they truly have a chance of winning. And the next category are just some players who it's not really expected, but I think they still have a shot, such as Naomi Osaka and Amanda Anisimova. So Amanda Anisimova, even though she went out in the first round of the US Open, I just love the way she plays. she plays with, her returns are just so clean, and I think she has so much talent, and the China Open ground, like the courts really suit her playing style. So does Naomi Osaka. I think so far, I won't speak for the long term, but so far the change in coaches really is helping her a lot. So I mean, both of these players really aren't the favorites, but I think if any of these players won, I really wouldn't be shocked. And yeah, that's all for the women's side. And now I think we can move on to the men's side. So we'll basically talk about the men's side in a similar format, but note that it will be shorter because it is a 500 points match. Like, it's only worth 500. So there are only round of 32, round of 16, quarterfinals, semifinals, and the finals. So the first sort of moment I want to talk about is Yuanchaoketebu beating Zhang Shuai. So Yuanchaoketebu is a really incredible player. I think he's been performing really well ever since the US Open, and even though he did lose to, I believe, Casper Ruud early in the US Open, I still think he is at the top of his game right now because he just beat Zhang Shuai, who won a title in Chengdu a week ago. So I think you really have a chance of making it deep in this tournament. And the other match I want to talk about is Medvedev versus Monfils. I think it's always just a treat to see two of these players play against each other. Not really that much to mention, but I will leave a link for you guys to check that match out. And I also want to mention Musetti, who's having a very successful year. I think this is his best year ever on tour. So he's also playing the doubles tournament in this China Open. He's playing it with Kobali. And let me just summarize his year for you guys because I think it's truly just incredible. And I think it all went up because, well, he became a dad. I don't think it did anything, but it all went up. But let me just summarize his year for you guys. So he made it to the quarterfinal of Adelaide and, however, lost in the second round in Australia. He made it to the round of 16 over the moment, the whole swing, another Asian swing of Open 13. And in ATP Rotterdam, he lost first round. In Qatar, he did make it, I believe, to he lost first round in Qatar, and he's just not been doing really well since losing. I feel like his start of the year really isn't that great. However, I feel like his year peaked a little bit during Wimbledon, where he did make it to the semifinal. I think that's where the turning point is. I think it really showed that he was incredible. He also made it to the finals of the Queen's Club Championships. So I think the grass court is really it suits his playing style really well. And after that, he won a bronze medal for Italy in the Olympics. And in Croatia, he made it to the final. In Cincinnati, he made it to the round of 32 in the US Open. Even though he lost in the third round, I think the US Open just isn't a great surface for him. And he needs to play more on sort of the US Open hard court surfaces to find his game. And then he made it to the final of Chengdu. And in China Open, he's playing against Yuanchaoketebu in the round of 16th. So I think he's just been doing really well, and I'm really interested to see how he will perform in this tournament. And without further ado, here are some players that I think are worth watching or are the favorites to win this tournament. So the first one is obviously the top seeds, which is Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. So to be completely honest, I think Alcaraz have a greater chance of winning this tournament than Sinner. Sinner's been not performing as well as he would have liked to, but to be honest, there's still so much more, and I think he have enough opportunities to make errors and improve on them, just because he can still play so many rounds before he actually face a top-seeded opponent. And Alcaraz, however, I feel like he's just been playing really well, partially because he played in the Labours Cup. I think that really played into his top form, but at the same time, I think he is also exhausted from playing that much tournaments, because it's just too much to be playing from the US Open to the Labours Cup and then to China Open. Like, it's too much on his body, I think. And so I think both of these players have obviously the greatest chance of winning it, but it would still be like a close match. And then I want to talk about Medvedev. I think Medvedev, even though he's maybe not had the most successful year, I really think he has a chance of winning China Open because he's been performing not incredible, obviously, but he's been performing just like he's making sure he can win every match to go further, not necessarily when he's playing at his best. But I think once the tournament progresses, sort of similar with Sinner, I feel like they will find their form. And then Musetti, as I said before, I think Musetti really have a chance of winning this tournament because a lot of the players he match up against, for example, Alcaraz and Sinner and Medvedev, just isn't at their top form right now, but Musetti, I think he is. So really interested to see how that matchup will bring us. And that is all for today's episode. This episode is, I always love it when it's the China Open because I just love that tournament. It's what got me into tennis. So yeah, and if you guys haven't subscribed to my social medias, you should. It is at Tennis Traverse on Twitter and Instagram. That is at Tennis Traverse. And if you're watching on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other streaming platforms, please rate my show. And next week, I will be talking about the end of China Open and talking into Tokyo Open and everything like that. So if you're interested, please tune in next week. So I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.